All right, we've hit the top of the hour, and that means we are going to bring in Gavin, event trader, and I guess we'll call him our political analyst, Carmine Ateo, and they're going to break down the G20 conference that we have coming this weekend. I do want to give everyone a reference point. On the in-play page at 10:13 a.m., so that's the timestamp, Carmine provided a G20 conference preview. I do have it up on the Trader Audio screen in case you want to follow along, look at it. Unfortunately, I can't get the whole thing on there, so I encourage anyone who wants to follow along to just scroll down on your in-play page and highlight that. With that said, I will get out of the way and give you gentlemen the floor.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim. How are you doing today, Carmine?
Pretty good, Gavin. How about you?
Oh, I can't complain. So obviously we're going to be talking about the G20 and what we should be expecting this week. But before we get into that, there's been some headlines that just crossed the wires. And why don't you give us your take on it? Obviously, President Trump saying that we want to get something done with China was the top headline that we saw, and saw a brief spike, but a little bit of a rollover on the dinner invitation list when that was released. Well, not officially, but there was some discussions about who would be at the table there. But why don't you talk a little bit about the Trump comments that we just saw, and explain to us if they're meaningful, and then we'll talk a little bit about Navarro too.
Yeah, not to get too much in the weeds here, but what happens is when he does these little press conferences outside by the plane, they are on a tape delay, so the Bloomberg and the reporters out there would be tweeting it out, but a lot of times you don't get the exact context of what he's saying until they play it back 20-25 minutes later. So his comment was that he was very close to doing something with China, but he doesn't know if he wants to do it because he believes tariffs are bringing in a lot of money to the United States. Now, this is something that he has said many times before, so I wouldn't really read too much into that as far as expectations for this upcoming event. This is very similar to the comment last, I believe it was last Friday, where he said something similar and the markets rallied on it. It was just basically repeating his same position that he's had for a while, that he does want to get a deal with China, but he is not sure about the terms and what exactly how exactly they want to do it on that. So I wouldn't really read too much into that so far. The main crux of this is going to happen as the dinner takes place on Saturday night.
All right, and the Navarro headlines. Explain to people why that's potentially positive or negative.
They'll be potentially negative. Peter Navarro is one of the biggest trade hawks in the administration. Him and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who I don't believe is going to be at the dinner, but Peter Navarro being there is potentially a negative because it reinforces the viewpoint of the administration to continue the hardline approach as far as tariffs go.
All right. With regards to the characters involved, there's obviously going to be a lot of headline risk going out there over the weekend. Outside of the two notables, obviously President Trump and President Xi, whose headlines should we be watching? Are we looking for Navarro, Lighthizer? Give us some of the names of headlines that we should be watching that could have meaningful impacts on the market.
Yeah, basically all the above that you mentioned there. I would definitely pay attention to Kudlow and Navarro and Lighthizer. Now, being just a caveat here is that Kudlow is one of the lesser trade hawks in the administration. So his comments will also might be framed a little differently than comments coming out of Navarro. So you kind of got to take that into account when listening to these guys, that they are seeing it through their own prism of their own viewpoint. So, and also on the Chinese side, there's the Vice Premier,
Yu
He, yeah. That he's going to be important too, along with Xi. I believe he's going to be at the dinner table as well. So they're all going to be talking about the trade issues on Saturday night.
Okay, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is he a part of these?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, he will.
All right, so basically Mnuchin, Lighthizer, Navarro, Ross to a lesser extent, and Kudlow to a lesser extent is how you frame that?
Yeah.
Okay. Give us some of the specifics. When exactly are they meeting? Any idea on when headlines might be starting to hit wires at all?
They will be meeting on Saturday night. Just one more thing on the prior comments. Larry Kudlow had a press conference earlier this week. I believe it was on Tuesday, where he basically reiterated, Trump's position, where he said there's a good possibility of a China trade deal. However, if the following demands are not met, the president will stand by his tariff policies, and he listed what those demands are, such as issues of intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, significant tariff barriers, and an administration with like zero tariffs and non-tariff barriers and zero subsidies. So he repeated those demands ahead of the meeting. Now back to your question, the meeting's going to take place on Saturday night, so we probably won't get any information until either late Saturday or early Sunday morning on this. This is going to be one of the final meetings that the president's going to have. He's going to have a meeting with several other leaders tomorrow and Saturday. There will be several what they call pull-asides, where the president will be on camera and answering questions from reporters. So expect similar comments to what he made today when he was waiting for the plane, that he would like to do a deal with China, but he's not sure about what the terms are going to be. That he believes tariffs are good for the country. Expect similar comments to that on Friday when he's talking to reporters throughout the G20. And those comments should be, again, taken with a little bit of grain of salt, because this has been his stance for a while, so he's basically repeating what he has been saying for a while.
Right, is negotiating style. Has there been any mention of a statement put out by the two sides? And we always get the G20 directive at the end. Has there been any comments about a joint statement between China and the U.S. or anything along those lines?
There could be. It could be a part of there's definitely going to be what they call a G20 communique, where all the countries basically say, what went on during the meeting. Whether there'll be a separate statement from the U.S. or China, I think there would be, because there's been such a lot of interest in this particular meeting with Xi. So I do expect that too as well.
Okay. So with that in mind, we don't need to get too deep into the weeds on this next piece, but basically just give us a quick rundown of what tariffs have gone into place and kind of what's on the table for discussions on Saturday night.
Yeah, so there's basically, we got 3 tariff tranches in place right now. We have the 34 to 16 and the 200 billion.
Carmine, not to interrupt you, but you posted your trade update under the SPY ticker for anybody that wants to follow along, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that shows all the graphs and everything. So the 3 basic tariff tranches as far as China they're on right now are the 34 billion, the 16 billion, and the 200 billion. Now the 200 billion is the one that's basically in focus, because there is expected to be a rate increase from 10% to 25% on that tariff tranche on January 1st. That is going to be one of the topics that is going to be under discussion. In addition to that, they're also going to speak about the exemptions for Apple products. Now, I don't think there's going to be any movement on that without, Tim Cook's approval, because, it's not like they can just say, we're going to put the tariffs on, and then he's probably going to want to talk to Apple about that before he does that, because they had a deal where they were going to do the exemptions. So I wouldn't expect anything coming out of this meeting from that, but there might be some negative commentary towards that. But as far as officially removing the exemptions, I wouldn't expect that.
But that's something you would be looking for just in case, to be on the safe side, any sort of Apple-specific headlines on possible exemptions.
Correct.
Okay. So lay us out a couple. I know you did a nice job in that 1013 comment. Why don't you run us through the different scenarios and the likelihood? I know you're a big fan of following gambling lines on these just to get a gauge of where public sentiment is. So why don't you run us through the scenarios and kind of give us the idea of what the baseline scenario is at the moment?
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't have a betting market for this, so I wish they did. But it'll be very, very helpful. But there's many different scenarios that can happen. Let's go through what I think would be positive outcomes for the markets, and then I'll go through what I think neutral would be and some negative outcomes for the markets. So as far as positive outcomes, the two leaders can agree to delay the rate increase on a $200 billion tariff tranche. Also it's possible they can agree to a larger framework that would include repealing existing tariffs. I think that's highly unlikely, but it is possible. As a reminder, President Trump told the Wall Street Journal earlier this week that it's highly unlikely that he would delay the tariff rate increase. So that's something to keep in mind there.
What do you think Xi has to put on the table in order to get that deal done?
I think Xi has to make some movement on intellectual property rights, and President Trump is very concerned with the tariffs that China has in place on automobiles and industrial equipment and things like that. So he has to make some movement there, I think, in order to get some type of deal where that rate would be delayed.
Okay, and the neutral outcome that you have for this?
The neutral outcome is basically, I think it's most likely outcome where they would basically say, hey, we had a good meeting, that we're going to keep the lines of communication open. There's been no decision on the rate increase yet, but he'll probably just dangle that out there saying, hey, we still might delay that. We don't know yet. We'll see what happens. And just basically saying, hey, the meeting went well, and we're going to keep talking.
And then the negative outcome, outside of course, fisticuffs between the two gentlemen, the negative outlook. Why don't you run down that for us?
The negative outlook would be that two leaders have a poor meeting, and which will cause the Commerce Department to initiate an investigation into the final tranche of the $260 billion in tariffs. Now, one caveat with this. They can initiate the investigation, but it's going to take about 3 to 4 months for that to take place. So it's not like if the meeting goes poorly, they can say, okay, tomorrow we're going to put these tariffs on. The Commerce Department has to initiate the investigation. So the president makes it sound like, and I'm not criticizing him for this, but he makes it sound like he can do it right away. That's really not the case. The Commerce Department would need to initiate an investigation into the tariffs, which would take about 3 to 4 months. And as you know, Gavin, there's plenty of back and forth scenarios when these investigations are had. We went through this with the last 3 tariff tranches. So.
Okay. And where do you think the market is gaming in for the baseline scenario?
I think I think there's been a lot of analysts chiming in on this, as you know. I think the market is basically expecting them to have a meeting and just keep the lines of communication open, more like the neutral outcome that I expected, that I listed there on the preview. If like I said, if there's something more, the president basically showed his hand a little bit by saying it's unlikely that tariff rate would increase. Now, if it does, if they agree to keep that at 10%, that's a positive for the markets. And if they don't, I think that's probably pretty much what people are expecting.
Okay. What are the primary? I know you break this down in your tariff previews or recaps, but what are the primary sectors that we should have on the radar for that next potential tranche of tariffs?
Hey Carmine. I hate to interrupt, but I do want to mention that chart traders buying some mini Nasdaq futures at 68.60 with a half-size position, risking 15 points. So I wanted to get that in there for anybody who's keeping an eye on chart traders trades. Buying mini Nasdaq 68.60 half-size position, risking 15 points. Sorry about that, guys. Go ahead.
No problem. Obviously, I'm playing that 68.50 level in the Nasdaq, but go on, Carmine.
Yeah,
if you need to repeat, let me know.
They haven't provided the list of what would be the $267 billion tranche yet, but it's basically everything but the kitchen sink when you get to that point.
Well, that's the final tranche, right? But we're talking about the $200 billion. That
okay.
10% to 25%.
I misunderstood you. The $200 billion tranche includes auto parts, chemicals, furniture, retail products, electronics. So basically, to any of the retailers here, automakers, industrial names like Boeing, Caterpillar, things like that would be impacted by these tariffs, or are being impacted by these tariffs as they are in place.
All right. So that gives us a pretty good feel for Trump and Xi. Why don't you, what other meetings is the president having? I know he's going to be meeting one-on-one, I believe, with Vladimir Putin. Any other meetings and potential fallouts that we should be looking for here from this G20 summit?
Yeah, he's going to have several other meetings. The first, as you mentioned, he's going to be meeting with Putin. You're going to be talking about the ongoing situation over in Ukraine, where Russia has been seizing some boats and things from Ukraine there. And if there's any talk about economic sanctions or anything like that, that would be negative for the Russia stocks, Yandex and MTL, and RSX is ETF on that one. As far as oil and some of the OPEC members will be meeting on the sidelines. Now, the president won't be involved in this, but a lot of the OPEC members will be meeting on the sidelines ahead of the December 6th OPEC meeting. So there may be some commentary there. As you know, Gavin, they are expecting to cut oil production at the next meeting. So that might be already priced in, but we will be probably likely to see some headlines out of that. And finally, that he will be meeting. The president will also be meeting with leaders of South Korea, Japan, India, Turkey, and Brazil. So anything really goes as far as that. I haven't seen anything what's likely to come out of that, but we'll just basically have to wait and see what happens.
Okay. So now just keeping an eye, somebody had wrote in about a question. Well, number one was the impact of the steel and aluminum tariffs. I haven't seen too many studies on that at the moment, so I don't know if you've come across anything. But the second question was just with regards to the worst case scenario of a 25% tariff and the impact on the supply chain. And I don't know what you've been coming across, Carmine, but from what I've seen, a lot of supply chains have already started moving out of China, and Indonesia and Vietnam and some of the peripheral regions in Asia that still have the cheaper labor have been the winners. Have you been coming across anything on that side?
Yeah, that, and the fact that a lot of the big companies have been pushing forward a lot of their orders to get ahead of the tariffs. So, yeah.
Okay, so that'll certainly be one thing that we'll want to be taking a look at. So we've gone through the G20, some of the different discussions. One thing I guess I would say about Buenos Aires is it's 2 hours ahead of East Coast time, so at the moment in Buenos Aires it would be 1:18. So I guess keep that in mind when you're thinking about dinner dates and potential headlines, that they would be a little bit ahead of the markets at the moment. So one other question, Carmine, that I was looking to address with you, just as a little bit of an add-on, as you're our government special situations guy. After the G20, I think the next thing from the macro standpoint on a political issue, we're going to see a lot of discussions about the upcoming budget talks, and a lot of discussions about potential shutdowns. You want to give us an early look at what some of the potential headlines are there, some of the key dates that we want to keep an eye out on, and what some of the early expectations are for these discussions?
Yeah, before I do that, let me just point out too that the President Trump and the leaders of Mexico and Canada are also expected to sign the USMCA trade agreement. Now, the fact that they're signing it really doesn't accomplish much, to tell you the truth, because what's going to happen next is all the Congresses need to approve it before, and then it'll become an official deal. So that I just want to point that out, that they are going to be signing it at the G20.
With regards to that, I would just also note that that Senator Elizabeth Warren opposes that deal as she starts making some early inroads into what looks like to be ramping up for a run for 2020, I think. Also, a headline crossing as we talk, that Navarro will be attending meetings between Trump and Xi, according to sources. So they keep throwing Navarro out to looks to me to try to rein in some of these longs, perhaps. But two side headlines that are crossing as we come across as we're talking here. But so Carmine, with regards to the budget and the government shutdown, what should we be looking for?
Yeah, well, just to give you some background here, there's basically a couple different camps in Congress here. There's the more conservative people that want $5 billion for the border wall before any agreement can be reached on the budget, and there's another group that wants a bill to be included in the budget bill that would protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. So it's either you have to kind of watch both of these to see which way they're going to go, see which group is a little bit more passionate, a little bit more wants to push the issue as much as possible. This is not going to be a full government shutdown if it happens. It's going to be about 6 or 7 departments. What happened was that they funded most of the departments, such as defense and the State Department and things like that, earlier this year, but they left open Department of Homeland Security, Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy, and 3 or 4 others that I can't remember at this point. But so you just have to basically watch how these groups play out here. They made their demands, and whether or not they're going to stick to them is the key. A lot of times, these guys make these demands here, and then they say, okay, we'll forfeit that and for another time. But if there is a shutdown right now, the betting markets are pricing in a 36% chance of a government shutdown, which is up a little bit from last time I looked at this, and so if that happens, there'll probably be inject a little bit more uncertainty into the marketplace, ahead of the Christmas holiday season.
All right, great. And as we're talking, Carmine, headline after headline about exploring a deal with China is crossing now. So I guess the end game that I would say on this, Carmine, is that we could expect a lot of headline chop over the next 2 days. So I'd just kind of be careful with that. And I don't think that there's really anything new that could be said. As you stated, the baseline scenario has been laid out and market expectations are being laid out here. So to me, I would not be trying to chase any of these headlines one way or the other. I don't know if
I agree with that 100%. Especially, just being aware as well that the president and a lot of the leaders here are going to make statements that they made prior. So if he says tomorrow when he's in front of the camera, hey, I like China and I think it's possible we can make a deal. He said that today. He said that earlier last week. So it's just able to extinguish new comments from comments that are made prior is going to be the key.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I know you'll be following that. Carmine, you got anything else to add at this point?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
All right, well, as per usual, thank you for joining us and helping get us straight and what to expect. And I'm sure we'll be doing a follow-up next week to see exactly what shook out from this meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you, Gavin.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.